Greetings, Hotep. This is your brother Beniti Amon Ray, back with another post/class. And the topic that we are going to discuss tonight, I want to get into this, which you hear a lot of people talking about or discussing, is these so-called end times that we're living in. I don't like that word, but we're going to explain that, because when we say end times, we need to define that a little more clearly. We're more at the end, or the planet Earth is at the end of an era, leaving one era of consciousness, going into another level of consciousness. So there's many changes that are going on our planet right now. Some understand it, some don't. Some people correlate it to incorrectly. They like to use the doomsday religious prophecies spoken of in the Bible. A lot of people will quote the book of Revelations, and really they have no idea what they're talking about, because they're using terminology that was written in an apocryphic sense, and it was written at a time where things were being described based on the knowledge and information they had then. I don't want to get into too much of the metaphors of the book of Revelations, but religious people will use books of the Bible. They use the Sermon on the Mount that so-called Jesus spoke on the Mount of Olives, talking about end time, rumors of wars, etc., earthquakes, pestilences, etc. Now this represents actually that Christ consciousness that exists in us, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. When you go into those books, anytime, whether you're reading the Bible, you can go into the Mayan prophecies and the Mayan calendar, you can go into the pyramid texts, you can go into the Egyptian mysteries. All great cultures always recorded great cataclysmic changes in nature when things were starting to happen, or changes were on the horizon. So we got to get out of the term of using, or get out of using the term, I should say, the end. Okay? Because if you're a metaphysicist, there's no such thing. Okay? And what I mean by that is, when you say that there's an end, what are you saying subconsciously, whether you're aware of it or not? If there's an end, you now have to establish what the beginning is. And we know there is no end. Existence just is, and we know things renew itself and goes through cycles, especially our planet. Now, I know I've talked about this before in the past on other classes and postings, when dealing with equinoxes and epochs. Okay? An equinox is roughly 24,896 years, or rounded off to 25,000 years, and an epoch would be roughly 50,000 years. Now, every equinox, and more so every epoch, as recorded in history, if you go study, and again I'll use for example the Mayan calendar, and I'll also use for an example the Egyptian calendar, you will see recorded in their writings, they always chart through astronomy a great astrological change on the planet, through astrology and astronomy. They travel, they log the movement of the planets, and certain movements that our Earth is in accordance with the alignment of some of these planets, will determine what is coming over the horizon. Let me give you an example. Most people, if you don't understand the true hidden meanings of some of these fictitious stories that we read in the Bible, for an example, they take the Messiah Jesus. Let's use the character, and I say the fictitious character because let's establish this: there is no quote-unquote Jesus that they write in the Bible. There is a Jesus figure that can trace pre-Bible on back into ancient Egypt, whether you want to call him Heru or Horus back into Samaria, whether you want to call him Tammuz. It's just a story that's been grafted and passed down to history. We've got the modern day mixed, diluted, watered down version of it in what we call our Bible today. But they signify the return of the Messiah. And one of the terms of the Messiah, as he's referred to in the Bible, is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. We all know that. Now, we never asked ourselves, what is the symbolicism of the lion? Where does that come from, and why is the tribe of Judah affiliated with the symbol of the lion? Well, lion, or Leo the lion, goes back to the Leo constellation. It's charting a certain era of consciousness. They say that Christ consciousness will return under the sign of Leo. Now you have to go back and study real astrology. We're not talking about, again, watered down, diluted nonsense, or these charlatans that claim to be astrologers and psychics. Not that fictitious astrology. You have to go back into planetary astrology, and it kind of coincides with metaphysics and astronomy to kind of tie this symbolicism in together. So it was saying that new era, for lack of a better word, or that Christ consciousness would come through the sign of Leo the lion. Now, you have many, I want to talk about this for a minute, you have many so-called mystical orders and fraternal orders out there that claim that they're teaching the secrets. Well, let me explain this to you. And this statement comes from experience. And I'm sure many people watching this video may or may not be a Mason, an Eastern Star, a Shriner, member of the Golden Dawn, any mystical fraternity you might think you belong to that you're getting so-called secrets. You're not really getting anything. And I'm telling you, because I've walked through all those orders as a growing process, and the experience you get from it is they don't really have the so-called secrets they claim they have. You'll find out, like I've said before, the secret is there is no secret. The biggest secret is creating the illusion that there's a secret, and you keep chasing that secret thinking you're going to find out something great and mystical, when everything you need to know lies dormant in your DNA and your RNA, and those answers are hidden within you. They're encoded within you. But the biggest trap is if somebody can confuse you and have you believe that seeking outside yourself to external sources is going to give you the answers to these problems, these questions you might have about your existence, or why you're here, or where you're going, where you came from. These are the million-dollar questions we're all seeking, the questions of life and death. But these mysteries of life and death have been so watered down, and people have used it over the centuries to start religions and create fear and ignorance. And that's why I did one post a few weeks back, religion is a cancerous ignorance that's destroying our planet. It is, because it is creating a certain level of ignorance, because for the most part, and this is not to say, but I gotta keep it real and straight to the point, this is not to say that everybody that follows mainstream religion, whether they be Muslim, Christian, or Jew, is a bad person. But we're going to say, on the wide scale level as a whole, most religious people are very ignorant, because they have what I call tunnel vision, and they're stuck in their faith and belief ways. And like I said before, having a belief, or having just faith and belief alone, is confirmation and acceptance of things not proven as factual. And you use that level of ignorance, or a level of ignoring factual information. So that's the problem with when you deal with religion, faith, and belief. It leaves you dumb, or as I like to say, Dr. Delbert Blair says, dumbed down and comatose to the reality of what's going on around you. So you have a lot of these mystical fraternities. Everybody's claiming they got the secret, and to me it's hilarious. And in my experience, walking through just about every Masonic lodge you can name, crossing every Shriner order you can name, they're all the same. When I say you can name, they all have similarities. So whether, for an example, you were a Prince Hall Mason, ancient, free and accepted Mason, international, what they call on their blue house, which are the first 3 degrees of Masonry, the entered apprentice, fellow craftmaster, Mason degree. They're all similar to a certain extent on the basis of their ritual. Now, the way some of these lodges operate might vary depending on which one of those branches of masonry you belong to. But the funny thing is, even in masonry, there's racism and hate. And let me explain. Masonry today obviously is controlled by Caucasians or Europeans. The masonry that you see today is a watered-down version, again, of the Egyptian mysteries, because true masonry, as we know, goes back to Egypt. When you analyze the so-called fraternal orders of masonry and you look at the wearing of the apron, the way the lodges are constructed, and again, I mentioned before in a previous post, a man that wore the apron was able to make the apron rise or come to a full erection. That's why when you look at some of the pictures of the Egyptian guardians that are standing in front of the pyramids, you see them holding a staff and an apron, but the apron, you'll see, is kind of elevated, as if under that apron, that guardian or guard had a erection, which was raising the apron. So the saying goes, a real man can raise the apron. This is getting into some of the teachings of the Egyptian mysteries that kind of correlated into masonry. So that's why, whether Masons are aware of it or not, they wear aprons, but they don't really know the true significance of it, and they give you some, watered down information based on the mysteries of the building, the so-called Solomon's Temple. Another character that did not exist, who we actually know, if we go back into ancient Egypt, to be somebody entirely different in ancient Egypt. When you correlate some of these timelines, you will find out the biblical timelines don't coincide with some of the characters when dealing with Egypt. Now, what I mean by that is, if you go into your Moses story, for an example, to show you, and it's right there smack in our face, but we don't, again, for the most part, do the research and use common sense. They claim in the biblical story of Moses and the Exodus out of Egypt, okay, that the Pharaoh that Moses was encountering at that time was Ramses. Now, if you do the timeline according to their biblical history, which we know is inaccurate, but I'm saying according to their biblical history, you will find out that there's no way the character of the Bible of Moses mathematically lived at the same time of who they claim Pharaoh Ramses was. So you need to go look into that and research more proof that those stories are watered down, tampered with, inaccurate, and have no historical history that can back it up or validate it. I mean, I can go on forever about the biblical stories, whether it's Noah's Ark, the Ten Commandments, the Ark of the Covenant. To this day, none of those stories can be proven factual. And then again, when you're reading that Bible, and we talked about this on the radio show this past Thursday night, when you're reading the Old Testament or the Torah, it's really a book of rituals and history. There's no salvation in those books. Not like the so-called New Testament writers, the man-made writings of the New Testament. So it's not really dealing with established religion. It's dealing with rituals from a conglomeration of many different cultures. Because again, when you're reading the Old Testament, especially when you're reading the first 5 books of the Bible, which they call the Torah, you're reading a conglomeration of a history of different cultures, be they Sumerian or Egyptian. Okay. So I'm bringing all this up because this connects to the great shift in spiritual consciousness that's going on today on the planet. Now, over the years, many people have recruited people for these orders, claiming to prepare them for this great awakening or this great event that would take place, quote unquote, in these end times. So again, we got to establish it is the end in the sense that it is the end of an era. The world as we know it now will cease to exist so far as nature will, when going into this, what we call a sun cycle era, as the earth gets closer to the sun, consciousness changes, the planet changes, the natural ecology of the planet changes, and every time when you look at the study of this history, you'll find out there's periods where the planet is in prosperity, growth on all levels, and then when the planet is further away from the sun, it's in more of a declining period. And you'll find different races ruled in these periods. You'll find that there's different levels okay, of consciousness that took place in these periods. And that's the key that we want to focus on right now. So where are we? The question is, in this day and time, having gotten all this information from many different sources the last 50 to 100 years, we'll focus on preparing us for this day and time. I mean, people have been predicting the end of the world. I mean, we can go back, 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, and they've all been wrong because they don't understand what the end of one cycle is and the beginning of another. There is no such thing as the end. There is no end of the world. Get it out of your head. And again, I couldn't care if you believe in religion or the Bible, and you can go to that Bible, because to show you that you're wrong, if you're a religious person listening to this, go back and read your Bible, especially the book of Revelations. It talks about a new heaven, okay? And then people say, oh, that's talking about spiritual transformation in heaven. But what does it say after that? And a new earth. That's the thing people keep missing. So it's, again, if you don't understand the Bible from a metaphysical perspective and you look at it literally, you won't see it. It talks about what we know ceasing to exist in a new heaven and a new earth would be put in our midst. Okay? It's talking about a replenishing period, a recycling period. It's talking about a period after great cataclysmic changes on the planet. A new heaven and a new earth would be put into place. So, again, there is no end. There is no doomsday. There is no apocalypse that people like to pass on. And what that does is it creates a state of fear and ignorance. Because it creates the fear of the unknown. People feel like when they subscribe to those dogmas and doctrines that there's some great cataclysmic event on the horizon that's coming. And then I can use that fear principle to get you in line with a certain ideology I might want to profess, and tell you if you don't get in line with this ideology, you're not going to make it. And I always say, make it where? Because you have all these charlatans that are out here now claiming to have the key to salvation, and that they can take you to some mystical place and save you. And again, I say it as it is. Whether it's Farrakhan claiming he's got direct link with the mothership, and again, I agree with a lot of things Farrakhan says and a lot of things I don't. But I don't believe one individual has the full capabilities to have sole power of your salvation or a multitude of people's salvation, whether they male or female. Then you have Dr. York and the Nubians, who Nubians believe, and I used to be a Nubian for many years, ex-Nubian now, I want to make that clear, who believe that Dr. York has the ability, which I find comical, being incarcerated in prison and he will spend the rest of his life there and pass on, believe that he has the ability to take them to some sham or spaceship, and he's going to take them to the planet Nibiru and that's spookism. Okay, the list goes on and on. You've had in the past Jim Jones, you've had David Koresh, you've had all these wackos who use metaphysical, mystical principles and religious principles and dogmas to control the masses. And then you have, of course, your modern day religions that do it today. You have your biggest gangsters and probably the most criminal gang on the planet called the Vatican. The cardinals, popes, and priests, they're all in ranks, and if you really look at it, it's a big-ass gang. You just got to look at it on the right way. The Pope, he is, your John Gotti or your mafia boss. And then you have beneath him certain levels and ranks who do the bidding of their ideology. Now, I've said this before. I'm sure I have. Maybe I haven't, but I'll say it again, if I have or I have not. The Catholic Church is one of the few branches of Christianity. And I want to say this: they're the original branch of Christianity, because today, if you are a Christian, whatever kind of Christian you call yourself, non-denominational or not, or one of the many denominations that's floating out there, all branched out originally from the Catholic Church. So really, you're a cult if you branched off from the Catholic Church, which was the first or the oldest form of Christianity here in Western society. They're one of the few branches. They don't go door-to-door evangelizing like you see some of these other organizations. They don't evangelize like some of these other organizations because they don't have to. Because they have a power structure that's far superior to any other of these organizations. And I mean, I want to get into the whole history of the Vatican now, But we know the Vatican is a city within itself. It's a government within itself. It's self-sufficient. It has its own currency system, its own constitution. It's its own entity within an entity, and that's a whole other story. That deals with severe power on the planet, especially when you tie in the Catholic Church connection with the Jesuit order, who is probably responsible for for some of the most severe atrocities on the planet. But again, that gets into a whole nother level or a whole nother story. But you'll find that through these religions, ignorance is spread all across the globe. So now, when we deal with where are we in these end times, I want to talk a little bit about pole shifts. The reason why I want to talk a little bit about pole shifts, what are pole shifts? Now, like I said, in the last couple of years, especially, we know we're a little bit 2.5 to 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years removed from the big thing that was talked about called 2012. Okay, I want to talk about that for a minute. Leading up to 2012, and I want to go back, and most of you that are familiar with this information can relate. There was such a big build-up the last 2 to 3 years up to 2012. Out of people's ignorance, people weren't really sure what was going to happen. You had people on the fence on many different levels as far as what did 2012 really represent. Some thought it was the end of the world. Some thought there was going to be great cataclysmic events, and we were all going to be destroyed, and you had to be in certain spots that were spared from these pole shifts, because there can be certain effects when the poles shift. East becomes west, north becomes south, vice versa. The magnetic grid of the planet changes. So some people believe that it was the end, that the planet was going to spin into a world of doomsday. Then you had some people that looked at it more from a spiritual aspect. They felt it was a change in spiritual consciousness, and they were partially right. So there was all this myths and mythology out there about what 2012 was. Like I said, man, you got to understand. At that time, around that time, they released the movie 2012, which I thought was comical. Now, I want to say this, and I say this to many people over the years. When you are uncertain about information and how to confirm this information, it's real simple. When you see the Caucasian making movies about this stuff, okay, you can't take it seriously. So that should have been one of your first signs about 2012 being a hoax. When he starts making movies about it, and he's insulting you right in your face, and then you're so stupid and you're going to see these movies and pay to see these movies, that's how you know it's not what you think it is. You want to be scared and worried when you see them in mass scales right in front of your face, exiting on out of here, and trying to go to places like Mars, where they're living right now, and they're doing it on discrete levels. Whether you're aware of it or not, or accept that or not, it is true, and you need to confirm that for yourself. I'm not here to try to get you to believe that or anything I say, because remember, in this day and time, our job, people like myself and others like me, male or female, we are awakeners, and our job is just to spread the information. I couldn't care what you do with it. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility, though, is when you're aware and you know, your responsibility is to teach and educate. So you can't be aware and know and not teach and educate, but you can't force anything or anybody to do something. So it's up to that individual. They become responsible when you make them aware. So that's why I say, and I say this with all due respect, I couldn't care if you accept what I say or not. That's irrelevant to me. That's not what my job is. My job is to bring the awareness of the information, and it's your responsibility to look further into it and raise yourself up to the realization of it. That's the difference. Okay? So as we see, the whole 2012 thing wasn't what people thought it was. So like I said, when you see them mass exiting out of here and they're not hiding it, then something is up. So like that old saying, don't believe the hype. You know, look into it. If people would have studied the Dresden Codex, which ties into the Mayan calendar, you would have saw what 2012 really was talking about. Okay? So what are pole shifts? Okay? They are changing magnetic fields. because remember, the magnetic poles of the planet shifted in 2012. In doing that, the magnetism of the planet changes, the energy grids on the planet change, and those changes or shifts have an effect on us. Okay? They have an effect on us spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically, and that's why you're seeing all the drastic changes that have been going on our planet. More so, I want to say, for the last 8 to 10 years than ever before, in humans, in their behavior, in their nature, their character and their personality, and also you see these mass cataclysmic changes going on in nature. This is going on as we speak and will continue as we speak. Always understand this: you are who you are by your DNA. Okay, let's establish that. What you're seeing happening now, and you've heard me talk about before, as the Earth gets closer to the Sun and the Sun emits that solar energy, and this is more power for melanated people, because melanated people can absorb that energy or that synthesis just like a plant does through photosynthesis. It recharges that plant. Well, that sun is that vessel that recharges you as a melanated people, regardless of what level of melanin you have, because everybody has certain traces of it on lower levels to higher levels. And we're not just talking again about skin melanin, we're talking about neuromelanin. Very important to understand. You have to have the full understanding and breakdown of that, because the skin melanin varies on so many different levels amongst us as human beings. And melanated people, when dealing with Latinos, Asians, and different ethnicities that have it on a lower level, as opposed to higher levels as maybe our blue, black, dark African brothers in those parts of the world. That's the physical representation of the skin melanin on the outside. The neuromelanin, which is every aspect of your central nervous system, your organs, the whole functioning of your insides, tying into also the central nervous system, the brain, is all encoded with what we call melanin or neuromelanin. And that's the key to really understanding this. That's the key. And I also want to point out, as of the posting of this show on this date, the 20th, this Thursday on the 23rd, we have Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum coming back on the show to kind of get more into that dark conscious matter that he discussed in his first visit with us, to help us to understand that. So he'll be back this Thursday evening talking about that on the show. And I know some of you that have been watching the YouTube videos here have been tuning into the show, and some of you have signed up for the show, and we appreciate that. And there's some really good shows, and you definitely want to, if you're able to, tune in on Thursday nights. We got some good shows. We've had, again, Dr. Phil Valentine on, we've had Dr. Delbert Blair on, Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum, Dr. David Emotep. This past week we had Scott Allen Roberts on. We have coming up, it's either going to be at the end of May or the first week in June. Just waiting for her to confirm. Dr. Jewel Pookrum will be coming on in a couple of weeks. We're going to have Dr. Delbert Blair back. We had Scott Allen Roberts on this past Thursday, who talked about two of his books, The Secret History of the Reptilians and The Bloodline of the Nephilims, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilims. We got archaeologist Ralph Ellis coming on the 30th of this month. A lot of good shows. We also have a sister that's actually who I made connections with through this YouTube channel, that's put a book out dealing with a lot of the topics that we talk about here on the show. She'll be coming on May 6th, which that's going to be a Wednesday show. Just for those that follow the show, there will be 2 shows in the month of May we're going to be doing on a Wednesday night instead of a Thursday night, due to some scheduling conflicts. But anyway, tune into the show. Sign up for the show. That's on TalkShoe.com. Awakening Universal Minds is the name of the show. You can find the link right on the Mother Nubia Google page. So if you go to my YouTube page, you can just connect right to the Google page. You will see all the shows archived on the Google page, It has the link, and then, as you know, if I have you in my circle of acquaintances, I send out a link to the show a couple times throughout the week. So definitely tune in for that. So the magnetic shifts, and we want to finish up with this. The magnetic poles of the planet, as we said, have shifted, and it's affected consciousness. It's caused a change in humans, good and bad. Those that are not able to absorb these high-level conscious or spiritual energies, unfortunately, some of them are going out of their mind. And I've mentioned this a couple of times in previous posts. They're hearing voices, walk-ins. They're picking up guns. They're shooting people. They're committing these mass murders and shootings. These are the individuals that are lacking that balancement. And remember, like I said, whatever physical issue you deal with, if it's a physical ailment, if it's a mental ailment, so it's not just physical, its root or its problem has its origin in spirituality. We have to understand that. The problem is why there's never solutions to any of these problems, because nobody wants to attack it on the spiritual aspect first, or the metaphysical aspect. You can't figure it all out on the physical, because some of these things can't be explained on a physical level. Some of these behaviors can't be explained on a physical level. Some of these changes in nature can't be explained on a physical level. And I'm here to tell you, religion, or the enforcement of it, is not the answer of it. And people are going to be in these end times for a change of one era to the next. You'll have some people that will be flocking to religion out of fear, because they're not going to be able to understand all the great phenomena and change that's going on the planet, when really it's just happening within you. You just don't understand the changes because you think it's happening outside of you, but you've created the illusion that it's happening outside of you because you've subscribed to ideologies and thought patterns that exist outside of yourself. That's the problem. Now, if you can grasp that the change that your experience is coming from within, and you learn how to control that change. For an example, I've always used the term, and I've always said, you're either a part of the system or you operate outside the system. And let me give you an example. Or I've used another term, you're either part of the experiment or you're controlling the experiment. So when you're controlling the experiment, it's kind of like a play, and you're the writer. Do you understand? When you're a part of the experiment, somebody else is writing the play, and you're one of the actors in the play. So the person writing is the one that's going to dictate what you're going to do, say, behave, and how you're going to act. I use that little basic metaphor to get you to understand. At the end of the day, this really holds no clout. What I mean, what holds no clout, is all these cataclysmic changes in doomsday, because I get a lot of people that contact me, whether it's through email, whether it's in classes and lectures that I do. People are so fascinated with this whole doomsday, garbage, and I say it only affects you if there's a disturbance within yourself. Okay? This stuff doesn't affect us. We know, as gods of the planet, as wise scientists, as master metaphysicists, from a metaphysical perspective, whether you want to call yourself a master metaphysicist, whether you deal with alchemy, whether you deal with the occult, these are all our higher sciences that raise us to the realization and the reality that we are God or deities, that we're manifesting that deity within. This stuff doesn't affect us. It holds no clout on us. It doesn't matter. All we need to do is be aware, and that awareness helps you make those changes and adaptations spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. So I say this: it couldn't matter to me if I got up tomorrow and the planet whirled into a whirlwind of destruction. If you know that you're a being, a vital life force being of light and energy, what does that really mean? We live forever. We understand this through the Egyptian mysteries, We understand this through many different cultures that are connected to our DNA and bloodline. We know the physical body is just a shell. So if that were to happen, we would just, our living in eternity process would just be sped up. That's it. So a real mystic or a metaphysicist person, or somebody that deals with metaphysics, doesn't feel death or fear death. Okay? They understand it to the point where they understand it's just the beginning of eternity. Okay? And when I say the beginning of eternity, when we go back into that vital life force state, that state of light and energy, you can't destroy energy. Okay? Energy cannot be destroyed. Okay? It's just that. It's energy. And energy, when dealing with it on all levels, okay, from a scientific perspective, not from a religious or a faith perspective, you cannot destroy energy. And that's what you are. At the end of the day, if you speed up your vibrational frequency and you vibrated at such a high level in frequency, you would go back into that vital light force state, a being of energy and light. Now, we've gotten to this state, and like I said earlier in the class post, who and what are you and how did you get here? We are just vibrating at such a low frequency now. We've taken on this human form, and we've forgotten the formulas on how to get back to that vital life force state. Now, this planet has been destroyed many times. Your Bible is not the beginning of creation. Okay? When you read the first chapter of Genesis, and we discussed this briefly on the show Thursday night, in the very first chapter, the 26th verse, God is speaking to a group of beings, and He's telling them to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And I've said to you guys before, the Hebrew word is mole, to refill, which is confirmation there was something already there. This is not the beginning of creation. So your Bible is picking up after one of the many replenishing periods after the earth was destroyed. When I say destroyed, when there was great change. Not destroyed completely where it didn't exist, because this has always existed and will continue to exist. Destroyed in the sense that by a meteorite shower, where life was destroyed and new life emerged on a scientific level, when dealing it through nature, and a physical level through the emergence of life again in humans. But many different replenishing periods. So we have to establish that. This is not the first time that this has happened. It's just you haven't raised yourself up to realize you've been on this planet many times before. You are a reincarnation of beings that lived, some of you, during these many replenishing periods. And some of you have to keep coming back. You have to keep coming back here till you get it right. That's why some of you get deja vu. That's why some of you feel like I've been here before. Or you run into somebody and you say, wow, I feel like I know you. You understand? The reason why you get those, lack of a better word, instances of deja vu is if I've been here before. I've been to this place before. We've all had it. That's because you have been here before. And you must continue to keep coming here until you get this thing right. Now, you may not believe that, and you don't have to. But you will raise yourself up to the realization of it. You're here for a reason because you chose to come here. That's why you're here. Okay? Now, you may not understand why you chose to come here, but myself or nobody else can tell you that. You have to raise yourself up to that realization. So that's key. So we want to establish there is no such thing. Let's finish on this note. Let's break this illusion and this spell that there's such thing as the end. Get out of that idiocy. It doesn't exist. It's not real. It's a concept of ignorance that's been perpetrated through many different schools of thoughts and religion to control the masses and keep people controlled due to ignorance and fear. When you look at all the cultures that predate religion, when you look at the many different Egyptian cultures, the Sumerian culture, many different African cultures, they teach the reality of this through many of their writings how this symbolically ties into the changes of nature and consciousness. And these changes of nature and consciousness are a representation of the changes that go on inside yourself. It's that simple. It's not that complicated. And again, you don't see that if you're not, as I've said before, applying it from the sense that it's an inward journey out, not an outward journey in. You don't see that realization when you're going outside yourself and you're trying to contact some spook god in the sky for answers to your questions. And the funny thing about it is you don't even know if that God really exists. You've just been instilled with faith that you believe it exists, but you really don't know. And you can convince me, which doesn't hold a weight of shit to me, and I got to be real with you, I couldn't care how much faith you think you have. That's great. Not knocking it. If it works for you, that's wonderful. But really, if you're a person that deals with faith and belief, and you believe that there's some God in the sky or heaven that exists and has the answers to these problems for you, and you're waiting on salvation for this spook God to come out of the sky and save you, you're sadly mistaken yourself, and you've misguided yourself. Okay, and that's a fact, because you can't prove any of that stuff. It's just fictitious belief. This is the root of our problem that needs to be addressed. So when you go within, and all the great masters have said, all the answers exist within you. And it's not just a cliche. And how do you come to the realization of that? You have to, again, I've talked about it many times, you have to know the proper techniques of meditation. There's such tactics as remote viewing and astral traveling. You can intergalactically travel when you train the body. You can visit other realms of existence. And you can open yourself up to the realization of the existence of other beings. Now, I don't want to get too much into that right now because we're about to finish up. But as crazy as that may sound, it only sounds crazy to you because spiritually, mentally, you have not raised yourself up to that level. That's it. And like I said, we can't convince anything or anybody to accept anything, and it should be that way. But I'm also saying on the flip note, don't judge or knock it only because you may not have the experience to confirm it. That's the whole point. Because just because you can't confirm the reality of it doesn't mean that it's not true. Now, that can't be said for dealing with faith and belief systems, because that stuff can't be proven, period. You don't even need to apply that test to it. You can just use the test of common sense. So that's the issue here. We have to simply understand, and I've talked about this when I've done posts on the 7 principles of Tahuti and the Emerald Tablets of Tahuti. You know, when dealing with that alchemy or that self-transformation in your DNA, this is the alchemy process that takes place through your DNA and your blood. This is the true raising, for a lack of a better word, of the Christ consciousness within, that some people like to call it. And I'm just using terminology, because there's many different terminologies for it. That Christ figure, that Messiah figure, that deity figure resides within yourself, and you have to awaken it. Okay? So that's why I had focused on some of the earlier posts, and I want to get back to that soon, in dealing with the principles of Ma'at, and dealing with the principles of, or the 7 major principles of Tahuti. And I've said before, they coincide with each other. You have to know how to connect those two. You can't have one without the other. And you'll see the principles of Ma'at actually evolve out of Tahuti, of the 7 principles of Tahuti. But I always refer to the 7 principles of Tahuti as a good foundation for you to understand what this really is all about. Okay, once you leave all the spookism of everything that exists outside of yourself, then you bring yourself to the realization of what's really going on. And again, one of my favorite guides or roadmaps to use that are the 7 principles of Tahuti. It's one of the best tools that our ancestors have left for us to give us a good, whether you want to say understanding, or understanding, and overstanding, whatever, to the reality of what's really going on around you. Understanding everything about your existence. it removes the spookism. And again, when you deal with the Egyptian mysteries, when you deal with the metaphysical aspect of things, and you know how to correlate it correctly, you'll see it removes all the spookism that we falsely been taught. Because most of us, not saying all of us, most of us, have been raised through different schools of thoughts and false religions. Some of us came, into consciousness, for lack of a better word, at different ages or stages in our life. Most of us weren't born into this. We are still doing a cleansing on ourselves mentally and emotionally. And that's why I've said we're doing this now, not so much for ourselves, but for this next generation of children that's coming up. That's the key. Because most adults that claim in this day and time to be spiritually conscious, most of them at some point or another came up through monotheism. So that spell and that disease of monotheistic religious beliefs, it takes a while to get that out of the subconscious, whether you're aware of it or not. So most of us are still on that path. And I forgot who said it. I think it might have been Dr. Blair. I think it was. It might have been Dr. Phil Valentine, but I think it was Dr. Phil Valentine. He used it as somebody that's a recovering alcoholic. He said on one of his classes and lectures, "I'm a recovering, Christian," as if he was, he used it symbolically in a humorous sense, that he, like an alcoholic, is recovering from the effects of alcohol. We're recovering from the dumbed down effects of Christianity. So a lot of us are recovering Christians, Muslims, Jews, or whatever other stupid ideology we were brought up in that taught us to find out the truth about ourselves outside of ourselves. That's the problem. So I think the point for this class has been drawn home. Do not go outside of yourself. Okay. There is no such thing as the end. We'll focus a little bit more on what's caused the opening of this current change or cycle we're in, which were these pole shifts. We'll talk a little bit more about that down the road, but we see that's what that pole shifts represented in 2012. When the magnetic pole shifted, it also was a shift in consciousness. It's that simple. So when moving forward, okay, go within. In meditation, when you go into your sleep state, you actually contact the spiritual realm and you contact your ancestors every night you go to sleep. That's when you want to really meditate, go within and ask yourself the questions, and you'll get the answers. It's really that simple. We have to really go within, moving down the road in the future, to help us understand what's going on with us and why our planet is changing. Very important. So moving forward, if we take that metaphysical approach, that will, as I've said before, put us in line with working with and changing with nature. That's what I mean when I say that. It's real simple. It's not complicated. We only make it complicated. All right? Again, having said that, just a couple of quick announcements before we leave. Again, I want to remind you about the radio show, Awakening Universal Minds, on TalkShoe.com. Just to remind you again, you can find the link and the archives of all the show right on the Mother Nubia Google page. If you come to my YouTube page, just go right to the top and click the Google icon. It'll take you right to the Mother Nubia Google page, and you'll see the link to the radio show. And again, this Thursday, April 23rd, we will have Dr. Edward Bruce Bynum on. He'll be returning to continue his talk on dark light consciousness. He'll be dealing with melanin and matter, etc. Very important topics we need to know. So definitely don't miss that. I will give more information out for those that have access or can get to the South Florida area, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach. I will be doing another class on Sunday, May 24th at Sophia's Garden of Ma'at again. I'll give people that contact information when they make that or put that flyer out and give that information. Time should be the same. Everything's fairly the same, but I'll give that official information when it's available. But if you're able to be in the area on that day, definitely come through. Would like to see and meet some of the people that watch these videos if they have the access and the ability to do that. That's pretty much it for now. And again, wherever the ancestors take us in the next post, that'll be where we go. And like I said, I don't really kind of plan these out. I just kind of go with the flow. And whatever the ancestors and the spirits want us to talk about and discuss, hey, that's what we talk about and discuss. Alright, so we'll see you on the next post in a few. This is your brother Beniti Amun Ray saying Hotep.